Okay. Today we're going to read Frog and Toad Are Friends by Arnold Lobel.
Okay.
What is he doing right here?
Just reading a book to the green frog.
He's reading a book to the toad. The frog is reading a book to the toad.
I don't know. I think
Okay.
that's the toad and that's the frog.
Okay. The first chapter is Spring. Frog ran up the path to Toad's house. He knocked on the door. There was no answer. Toad, Toad, shouted Frog. Wake up! It is spring! Blah, said a voice from inside the house. Toad, Toad, cried Frog. The sun is shining. The snow is melting. Wake up! I am not here, said the voice. He doesn't sound happy, does he?
He is, because we can hear him.
Frog walked into the house. It was dark. All the shutters were closed. Toad, where are you? Called Frog. Go away, said the voice from the corner of the room. Toad was lying in bed. He had pulled the covers over his head. Frog pushed the Toad out of the bed. He pushed him out of the house and onto the front porch. Toad blinked in the bright sun. Can you guys blink? There we go. Help, said Toad. I cannot see anything. Don't be silly, said Frog. What you see is a clear, warm light of April, and it means that we can begin a whole new year together. Toad, think of it, said Frog. We will skip through the meadows, run through the woods, and swim in the river. In the evenings, we will sit right there on this front porch and count the stars. You can count them, Frog, said Toad. I will be too tired. I am going back to bed. Toad went back into the house. He got into the bed and pulled the covers over his head. But Toad, cried Frog, you will miss all the fun. Listen, Frog, said Toad. How long have I been asleep? You have been asleep since November, said Frog. Well then, said Toad, a little more sleep will not hurt me. Come back again and wake me up at about 1/2 May. Good night, Frog. But Toad, said Frog, I will be lonely until then. Toad did not answer. He had fallen asleep.
He hasn't asked us any questions yet.
Frog looked at Toad's calendar. The November page was still on top. Frog tore the November page down.
Oh.
There's the calendar. He tore the December page down, and the January page, and the February page, and the March page. He came to the April page. Remember, it's April, right?
That's so smart.
Frog tore off the April page too. Look at all those pages. So what did he do when he tore? What was it?
He tore off the pictures. I think he swept until April was gone.
He tricked him to make him think that he slept past April.
That's
so now
smart.
he thinks it's May. Then Frog ran back to Toad's bed. Toad, Toad, wake up. It is May now. What? Said Toad. Can it be May so soon? Yes, said Frog. Look at your calendar. Toad looked at the calendar. The May page was on top. Why is that? Said Toad as he climbed out of bed. Then he and Frog ran outside to see how the world was looking in the spring. What do you think they're going to see in the spring?
Snow.
No.
This is some fun stuff.
What happened?
Tiny bits of snow and flowers and plants and all.
Flowers is what they're probably going to see because spring brings flowers. One day in the summer, this is called The Story. One day in summer, Frog was not feeling well. Toad said, Frog, you are looking quite green. But I always look green, said Frog. I am a frog. What color are frogs?
Green.
Green. Today you look very green, even for a frog, said Toad. Get into my bed and rest. Toad made a frog a cup of hot tea. Who else drinks hot tea? Jonathan.
Me.
You both drink hot tea.
What do you do?
Frog drank the tea, and then he said, Tell me a story while I am resting. All right, said Toad. Let me think of a story to tell you. Toad thought and thought. But he could not think of a story to tell Frog.
I really hope this is that second question.
I will go out on the front porch and walk up and down, said Toad. Perhaps that will help me to think of a story. Toad walked up and down on the porch for a long time, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. Then Toad went into the house and stood on his head. "Why are you standing on your head?" asked Frog. "I hope that if I stand on my head, it will help me to think of a story," said Toad. Toad stood on his head for a long time, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. What happens when you stand on your head?
Nothing. All your memories go down in your brain.
You think all the memories will go down? You think that will help him?
Yeah, in your brain.
Let's find out. Then Toad poured a glass of water on his head. "Why are you pouring water on your head?" asked Frog. "I hope that if I pour water on my head, it will help me think
What will
of
it
a
do?
story," said Toad. Toad poured many
think I
glasses of water over his head,
Is he really good?
but he could not think of a
Are
story.
you asking a question about how that will help me?
Catch your bubble.
I wonder.
Then Toad began to bang his head against the wall. Oh my gosh.
God.
Do you think that would hurt?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that something we do?
No.
No.
Like that's something Colton does.
"Why are you banging your head against the wall?" asked Frog. "I hope that if I bang my head against the wall hard enough, it will help me to think of a story," said Toad. I am feeling much better now, Toad," said Frog. "I do not think I need a story anymore." "Then you get out of bed and let me get into it," said Toad, "because now I feel terrible." Why do you think he feels terrible?
Oh, he's trying to trick him to get to sleep.
No, what did he do over here?
He banged his head. He feel bad.
Yeah, he banged his head on the wall, so now he feels terrible. Frog said, "Would you like me to tell you a story, Toad?"
There's
"Yes,"
one piece
said
of-
Toad, "if you know one." "Once upon a time," said Frog, "there were two good friends, a frog and a toad. The frog was not feeling well. He asked his friend the toad to tell him a story. The toad could not think of a story. He walked up and down on the porch, but he could not think of a story. He stood on his head, but he could not think of a story. He poured water over his head, but he could not think of a story. He banged his head against the wall, but he still could not think of a story. Then the toad did not feel so well, and the frog was feeling better, so the toad went to bed, and the frog got up and told him a story. The end." "How was that, Toad?" said Frog. But Toad did not answer. He had fallen asleep. We got one more. A lost button. Toad and Frog went for a long walk. They walked across a large meadow. They walked into the woods. They walked along the river. At last they went back home to Toad's house. "Oh, drat," said Toad. "Not only do my feet hurt, but I have lost one of the buttons to my jacket." Oh no. Do you get sad if you lose a piece of your jacket? I would be sad. "Don't worry," said Frog.
If
We
I
will-
was Miss Mustard, I'll be sad.
Don't worry, we will go back to all the places where we walked. We will find your button. What is it called when you go back to all the places you had been to?
Button. Retrace.
We're retracing our steps. They are retracing their steps. "We will soon find your button." They walked back to the large meadow. They began to look. Go sit, please. Sit
I
crisscross.
see something. 'Cause
They began to
sometimes
look
I
for the
miss
button
stuff.
in the tall grass. "Here is your button," cried Frog. "That is not my button," said Toad. "That button is black. My button was white." Toad put the black button in his pocket. A sparrow flew down. "Excuse me," said the sparrow. "Did you lose a button? I found one." "That is not my button," said Toad. "That button has 2 holes. My button has 4 holes." Toad put the button with 2 holes in his pocket. They went back to the woods and looked on the dark paths. "Here is your button," said Frog. "That is not my button," cried Toad. "That button is small, and my button was big." Toad put the small button in his pocket.
How big? He doesn't have buttons on his shirt.
A raccoon came out from behind a tree. "I heard you were looking for a button," he said. "Here is one that I just found." "That is not my button," wailed Toad. "That button is square. My button was round. Can we all make a round circle with our hand? Round." Toad put the square button in his pocket. Frog and Toad went back to the river. They looked for the button in the mud. "Here's your button," said Frog. "That is not my button," shouted Toad. "That button is thin. My button was thick." Toad put the thin button in his pocket. He was very angry. He jumped up and down and screamed. Can you say that? Up and down and scream.
Up and down and scream.
The whole world is covered with buttons, and not one of them is mine. Toad ran home and slammed the door. There, on the floor, he saw a white, 4-hole, big, round, and thick button. "Oh," said Toad, "it was here all the time. What a lot of trouble I have made for Frog." What is he feeling right now?
Sad.
He's feeling sad for making Frog help him. Toad took all the buttons out of his pocket. He took his sewing box down from the shelf. Toad sewed the buttons all over his jacket. The next day, Toad gave his jacket to Frog. Frog thought that it was beautiful. He put it on and jumped for joy. None of the buttons fell off. Toad had sewed them on very well. One more. A swim. Toad and Frog went down to the river. "What a day for a swim," said Frog. "Yes," said Toad, "I will go behind these rocks and put on my bathing suit." "I don't wear a bathing suit," said Frog. "Well, I do," said Toad. "After I put on my bathing suit, you must not look at me until I get into the water." "Why not?" said Frog. "Because I look funny in my bathing suit, that is why," said Toad. Frog closed his eyes when Toad came out from behind the rocks. Toad was wearing his bathing suit. "Don't peek," he said. Frog and Toad jumped into the water. They swam all afternoon. Frog swam fast and made big splashes. Toad swam slow and made small splashes. A turtle came along the riverbank. "Frog, tell that turtle to go away," said Toad. "I do not want him to see me in my bathing suit when I come out of the river." Why do you think he doesn't want him to see him out of his bathing suit?
Because he'll laugh at him.
He thinks they're going to laugh at him.
I know.
Frog swam over to the turtle. "Turtle," said Frog, "you will have to go away." "Why should I?" said the turtle. "Because Toad thinks that he looks funny in his bathing suit, and he does not want you to see him," said the frog.
I think he has.
Some lizards were sitting nearby. "Does Toad really look funny in his bathing suit?" they asked. A snake crawled out of the grass. "If Toad looks funny in his bathing suit," said the snake, "then I, for one, want to see him." "We want to see him too," said 2 dragonflies. 1, 2. "Me too," said a field mouse. "I have not seen anything funny in a long time." Frog swam back to Toad. "I am sorry, Toad," he said. "Everyone wants to see how you will look." "Then I will stay right here until they go away," said Toad. The turtle and the lizards and the snake and the dragonflies and the field mouse all sat on the riverbank. They waited for Toad to come out of the water. "Please," cried Frog, "please go away." But no one went away. Toad was getting colder and colder. He was beginning to shiver and sneeze. "I will have to come out of the water," said Toad. "I am catching a cold." Toad climbed out of the river. The water dripped out of his bathing suit and down to his feet. The turtle laughed, the lizards laughed, the snake laughed, the field mouse laughed, and the frog laughed. "What are you laughing at, Frog?" said Toad. "I am laughing at you, Toad," said Frog, "because you do look funny in your bathing suit." "Of course I do," said Toad. Then he picked up his clothes and went home. Why do you think that the Toad looked funny to everybody else?
Because he had pants.
Because he had pants and nobody else was having pants.
Because he was different from everyone.
He was different. Do we make fun of people for being different?
No.
No, that's not nice. We have one more.
Say your shirt came funny.
This is the letter. Toad was sitting on the front porch. Frog came along and said, "What is the matter, Toad? You are looking sad." "Yes," said Toad. "This is my sad time of day. It is the time when I wait for the mail to come. It always makes me very unhappy." "Why is that?" said Frog. "Because I never get any mail," said Toad. "Not ever?" asked Frog. "No, never," said Toad. "No one has ever sent me a letter. Every day my mailbox is empty. That is why waiting for the mail is a sad time for me." Frog and Toad sat on the porch feeling sad together. Then Frog said,
Well, why is Frog?
"I have to go home now," said Toad. "There is something I must do." Frog hurried home. He found a pencil and a piece of paper. He wrote on the paper. He put the paper in an envelope. On the envelope, he wrote, "A letter for Toad." Frog ran out of his house. He saw a snail that he knew. "Snail," said Frog, "please take this letter to Toad's house and put it in his mailbox." "Sure," said the snail, "right away." Then Frog ran back into Toad's house. Toad was in bed, taking a nap. "Toad," said Frog, "I think you should get up and wait for the mail some more." "No," said Toad, "I am tired of waiting for the mail." Frog looked out the window at Toad's mailbox. The snail was not there yet. "Toad," said Frog, "you never know when someone may send you a letter." "No, no," said the Toad, "I do not think anyone will ever send me a letter." Frog looked out the window. The snail was not there yet. "But Toad," said Frog, "someone may send you a letter today." "Don't be silly," said Toad. "No one has ever sent me a letter before, and no one will send me a letter today." Frog looked out the window. The snail was still not there. "Frog, why do you keep looking out the window?" asked Toad. "Because now I am waiting for the mail," said Frog. "But there will not be any," said Toad. "Oh, yes, there will," said Frog, "because I have sent you a letter." "You have?" said Toad. "What did you write in the letter?" Frog said, "I wrote, 'Dear Toad, I am glad that you are my best friend. Your best friend, Frog.'" "Oh," said Toad, "that makes a very good letter." Then Frog and Toad went out onto the front porch to wait for the mail. They sat there, feeling happy together. Frog and Toad waited a long time. 4 days later, the snail got to the Toad's house and gave him the letter from Frog. Toad was very pleased to have it. Why do you think that Frog wrote Toad a letter?
Because he was so mad he never got a note.
Because he was sad that nobody ever wrote him a letter. Do you think we should write letters to our friends to make them feel good?
Yeah.
I think that would be a good idea.
I made one for one of my friends at
You've
school.
made one before? Let's make another one today.
Okay. I can't be so bad.